Okay. First of all, good morning. Chodesh Tov, Shavua Tov. Bezrat Hashem, this should be a month in which we're able to move beyond all of our former boundaries, all of our past constrictions, to be able to leap forward, Pesach, to leap over all of our challenges. This is a special month to be able to experience the light of Hashem. This is a special month to be able to experience the love of Hashem. So Bezrat Hashem, in the merit of the month of Nisan, and the merit of our Rebbe, whose birthday just was, and the merit of all the true tzaddikim who are alive today, all those who are buried in the earth, and in particular to the Nachal Noveh Makor Chochma, to the tzaddik Yesod Olam, to Rabbi Nachman Fei Gazal, whose Torah we're trying to use to connect to experience in order to draw closer to the light of the Ein Sof. We said last week that this is the reason why we wash our hands. Because before we can draw down new moach, new mochi, new consciousness, new revelations of godliness, we first have to lagarish, we have to expel all the negativity, which Rabbi Nachman refers to as chokhmot chitzoniot, that is secular wisdom, or external or excessive knowledge. Not the type of knowledge that produces fruit, but the type of knowledge which inhibits or prohibits real knowledge from entering. Because Rabbi Nachman explains that according to Kabbalah and Chassidut, the mind, even though in some ways it's unfathomable, not just structurally, not just in how it functions, but the connection in which the mind has to the wisdom of Hashem, which is unlimited. At the same time, Rabbi Nachman says that our mind has a certain bandwidth. Just like with the internet, you have a certain amount of gigabytes that you can hold, so too the mind is able to only hold a certain amount of God consciousness at a time. And therefore, a person needs to release everything in which is not that in order to draw down more. And this is the concept of the washing of the hands. And afterwards, thus, we put on tefillin. Because through the purifying of the hands, then I'm able to lift up my hands to Shemayim, like the Pasuk says in Divine. Meaning to say that the hands represent Malchut, the hands represent Emunah, the hands represent influence. But the Malchut is very vulnerable to being captured. The Malchut is very vulnerable to the Sitra Achra, to the force of negativity in the world. Just like you see that people, they use their influence for not the positive, they use it for the negative. And because it's a concept which is called influence, it actually causes tremendous damage. Whereas, let's say, for instance, somebody has a bad thought about somebody else. It doesn't have the same degree of influence to which when somebody purposely tries to influence a situation, a person, in order to change or augment a scenario, a circumstance, and then as a result of that, there's tremendous pain and suffering that comes as a result. And on the other side as well, that if you're able to use influence for good, so influence changes lives, influence transforms reality. And no more do we see influence and the effect it has than now in the era and age of social media, that technology has taken so many leaps and bounds, and a person is able, from the confines of his own home, to influence people all across the universe, literally. So we see that it can be used either for the positive or negative, but because it's influence, it's the power, it's the koach of malchut, it's the koach of kingship. So as a result of that, it can either be used for the positive or negative. In the language of Chassidut and Kabbalah, they call it the malchut, the kedusha, the malchut of godliness, the influence of godliness, or the malchut the sitra achra, the influence which is informed and influenced by the forces of negativity. Now, we're saying as well that one of the chidushim of Rabbi Nachman here is that malchut is not just your ability and your koach to influence others, but it's your ability, your koach to influence yourself. That you also have a degree of malchut. Everybody does, says Rabbi Nachman. So therefore, if everybody has malchut, so how can everybody have malchut? You don't see that everybody's able to impact others in a way in which transforms and changes them. But Rabbi Nachman says everybody has malchut. Every Jew has malchut to some degree. So the very least amount of malchut that a person can have that's Jewish is on himself. That is that even if he's not able to influence others, his family, his friends, his community, the world, X, Y, and Z, he has to have been given some level of malchut because he's Jewish, and the Jewish people are connected to this quality of malchut, influence. So as a result of that, where is the influence he has with himself? His ability to change, to uplift, to transform himself. And that could also be used for the negative, which we see because either you're going up or you're going down according to spirituality. There is no such thing as remaining static. So your malchut is always working. Your power of influence is always affecting. It's either affecting you for the good and it's lifting you up, or your own personal malchut is bringing you down. And all this is the concept of the hands. So when the hands are down, this is kivyachol, so to speak, an imagery for the power of influence within yourself and the power of influence that is with others, that it's in exile. But when I wash my hands with da'at, when I wash my hands with God consciousness, when I wash hands, the power of influence with higher revelations of understanding than I previously had, then what happens is my power of influence is lifted up from the forces of negativity as if they were placed in a mikveh. And now the opposite happens. Instead of my hands being down to the floor, creating negativity, creating difficulties, creating challenges, in contradistinction to this, once I wash my hands in water, automatically my hands elevate, they move up. And when my hands are up, what is this the global symbol of? Tefillah. And we know that the Gemara says in Masechet Brachot that tefillah stands at the summit of reality, that it's higher than everything in existence. And Rabbi Nachman says explicitly in Likutey that one expression of tefillah, which is hibodedut, that is that I talk to Hashem in my own personal conversation, separated from anybody else, secluded, as if I'm speaking to my best friend, that this is the highest avoda that a Jew has within his arsenal of tools. That the greatest ability a Jew has to connect to Hashem, higher, Rabbi Nachman says, than learning Torah, higher, Rabbi Nachman says, than praying in a Beit Knesset with a minyan, is your own personal secluded meditation. Now, this is not to say that Rabbi Nachman was discluding or he was discouraging anybody from learning or from praying with a minyan, because it's clear when Rabbi Nachman says that how do you be a Breslaver Chassid? How do you be a real student of Rabbi Nachman? You keep the whole Shulchan Aruch. So he valued them very much. Even more so in his directives, at least explicitly than other Rebbes who came from the students of the Baal Shem Tov and from the stream of Chassidut. However, with that being said, he still says that higher than all those things is hibodedut, this secluded meditation, this secluded conversation that you have with Hashem as if you're speaking to your best friend. Now, your ability to do that, to pray, is dependent on your ability to lift your hands up. And a person cannot lift his hands up until he releases the externalities which have accumulated in his hands. So Rabbi Natan is saying that this is all alluded to in the process of sleep. That when I go to sleep, meaning when I fall unconscious, when I lose sight of tachlis, when I lose sight of the purpose of my life, when I lose sight of spiritual reality as being primary and ikar over physical, gashmiut, limited physical reality, that's the concept of sleeping. Now, when I have the zchut to wake up from this, that I have a hirhur of teshuva, that I decide I want to release myself, either if it's coming from challenges in my life, complications in my life that are now forcing me to look and to examine deeper, or whether it's something that I learned or somebody that I spoke to, something that I experienced, whatever. Now, I can't just go pray to Hashem, because it's not going to be effective, because I'm not going to have words to say, because your ability to speak, your ability to influence, your ability to connect and to transform reality is dependent on your hands being lifted up. For that, you need to wash your hands with water. And the water represents the waters of Da'at, the waters of the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, the waters of Chassidus, the waters of the Arizal HaKadosh, the waters of Kabbalah and Chassidut. And through those waters, as a result of that, a Jew expels all the negativity which is accumulated on those hands, just like when we wash our hands in the morning. And now you experience what's called mochin the gadlut, as opposed to mochin the katlut. That is, that instead of feeling this constricted small-mindedness, as a result of the washing of the hands with this waters of da'at, which is a hint, it's a remez to the future when Mashiach is going to release those waters all across the world. So then as a result of that, now I have mochin the katlut. I have expanded consciousness, what Rabbi Nachman refers to as a settled mind. And then I can actually pray. Like the pasuk says in Tehillim, Kuf Lamed Dalet, will lift your hands to the Kodesh. What does it mean, lift your hands to the Kodesh? So we know that in Kabbalah, it's explained that the word Kodesh is a code word. It's a hidden levush, it's a garment for the sphere of Chokhmah. Chokhmah represents the mind. So when the pasuk says, lift your hands to Kodesh, it means lifting up your hands to the mind. Meaning to say that now that I've washed my hands, the reason why I'm able to pray now is not just because my hands are being lifted up, meaning now I feel motivated to speak to Hashem, but it's specifically because my hands have been lifted up to the mind. That's the reason why I'm able to pray in a way that transforms myself and those around me. That's the reason why when I speak to others, I'm able to influence them, because now my words are influenced by and is being infused by higher consciousness. And now as a result of that, those words make their mark. And it is drawn from the hands da'at within the mochin, within the mind, meaning that my emunah that I have received from the waters of da'at on my hands, now as a result of being able to experience, let's say, the Torah of Chassidut, the Torah of Rabbi Nachman, now all of a sudden my hands are being purified from all my previous understandings of reality, all my previous paradigms. What they say in the language of cognitive behavioral therapy is that you have certain core beliefs. Now that Rabbi Nachman has shaken those core beliefs to their core, no pun intended, and now you have new core beliefs. Now, as a result of that, because you have washed your hands, now those hands which are filled with emunah, they now influence your mind, your moach, that you should now be able to experience your nefesh elokit, your godly soul, your God consciousness. And is created from this the concept of tefillin, shehem mochin, because the Arizal teaches, Rabbi Nachman teaches, that the tefillin are the physical manifestation of what in Kabbalah is termed mochin. That is the upper sfirot of the 10 sfirot, chokhmah, bina, and da'at, or very simply, consciousness. that until I wear tefillin, I'm considered to be asleep. Until I actually experience in a felt palpable way that Hashem is causing every element of my life, that Hashem is the creator of the events that are taking place in my life, that He is the first cause, He is the initial orchestrator, not just that He's allowing things to take place, but that He's causing everything in reality, that everything is going according to His ratzon. When a person has experienced this, when he feels this in his heart, in his mind, so then as a result of that, he now has tefillin on. Because the whole point of having the tefillin is that it should be a reminder to you that Hashem released you from Mitzrayim. And we know that the concept of Mitzrayim is the concept of miracles being hidden from you, Rabbi Nachman says. Meaning Hashgacha Pratit is an exile for you. You think that things are going according to nature. You think that you're making a certain amount because the economy dictates and this job can't make more than that. You think that Chas v'shalom, somebody in my family has some type of sickness or illness because of some genetic disorder and not because Hashem wants it to be. You think that for some reason you were hurt by another person and you think that that's because that person is cruel. And you don't think it's because Hashem wanted me to learn something from that experience. So Rabbi Nachman says that means you're sleeping. That's the concept of not having tefillin on. But now that I washed my hands with da'at, now that I started learning the Torah of the great Hasidic and Kabbalistic masters, now as a result of that I know that everything is from Hashem, now my hands are lifted up and my emunah is starting to be awakened. And as a Jew's emunah begins to increase, his mochin, his consciousness, his mind also starts to flutter. It starts to move. It starts to rejuvenate. It starts to increase in its capacity for experiencing truth. That's the concept of tefillin. They are the concept of true life and length of days. Like it says in Masechet Menachot, which is Gemara is the source for the laws of tefillin, where we understand how tefillin works, why we wear tefillin, X, Y, and Z, where we place the tefillin. This is all Masechet Menachot. It says, Hamaniach tefillin, zoche l'chaim. Any Jew that he wears tefillin, he merits to life. Now, something that we need to understand is that when the sages refer to life, they're referring to quality of life. The concept of life, says Rabbi Nachman, is life force. The concept of Chaim is chiyut, life force. The concept of Chaim is simcha, is joy. The concept of life is energy. The concept of life is happiness. When a person has these things, he's called alive according to the Torah. But when a person does not, he's called dead even when he's alive. DOA, dead or alive. So now this actually resonates deeply. Why? Because so many of us, either in the past or presently, feel some level of death. We feel like we're struggling so much. We feel like mamish, we've hit the bottom. And yet everybody around us says everything's okay, everything's fine, everything's okay. But you're inside, you're saying it's not okay. I'm in pain, I'm struggling. I feel very, very, very constricted. I feel very, very, very dead. Comes the sages to say, because you are experiencing some bechina of death. You are experiencing tumah, the impurities of death, that the forces of the Sitra Achra are giving you difficulty and challenges, and that's why you're feeling like that. However, when a Jew is able to experience, to place on, to manifest his own concept of tefillin, which comes from the washing of the hands, so as a result of that, now he has Chaim, now he has life, because it's a munah that leads to life. Like it says, that the tzaddik lives with his emunah, meaning to say that the emunah is what causes the tzaddik's life. The emunah is what causes the spiritual master, the Jewish soul, to be able to experience real, true, genuine quality of life. It is be'emunah. The emunah is the washing of the hands that takes place through drawing down the higher consciousness of the wisdom of the Hasidic masters, of the Mekubalim. And as a result of that, now my emunah is increased. Now I have Chaim. Now I have tefillin. Now I have truth in my life. And Rabbi Nachman says that as soon as a Jew experiences true, genuine, authentic truth, as a result of that, automatically he's going to be besimcha. As a result of that, automatically he's going to feel energy. As a result of that, automatically he's going to feel life force. He's going to feel excitement. He's going to be motivated. All of that comes from Chaim, from truth. But Rabbi Nachman says you can't have truth unless you first experience the waters of Da'at. And these waters of Da'at increase your emunah. And then through your hands being lifted up to your head, now your emunah informs and infuses your truth, your capacity for understanding transcendent, godly matters. Like one of our students said last week that he machavent, so Daniel, you should feel very good, that when he was listening to this Torah in Likutey Halachot, he thought of the parak, the chapter of Tehillim that David HaMelech says, which is Chaf Dalet. And it says there, who's going to ascend to the mountain of Hashem? Who is going to elevate into the makom, into the place of his kodesh? And now we can understand more of the depth here. Why? Who's going to ascend to the mountain of Hashem? So this is another code word. This is another levush. This is another garment that is explained in Kabbalah and Chassidut that our tzaddikim have used in order to convey this concept of mochin, that the concept of the mountain of Hashem is always referring to the mind. This is the mountain, because to be able to experience one's nefesh elokit, you have to first climb a very, very steep mountain. You have to cross over a very, very narrow bridge. And who is going to ascend into the makom, into this place of his kodesh? Now we know that the concept of space in Kabbalah comes from the left side, comes from the feminine aspect of spirituality. This is referring to the sphere of Bina. Bina is the highest intellectual female sphere. This is called Bina, and it says in the Midrash that women have a higher degree of Bina than men do. This is something they were gifted through their being created as Jewish females. However, it's taught by the Arizal HaKadosh, and Rabbi Nachman refers to this already in the very first Torah of Likutey Moharan, that the place in which Bina experiences understanding, this place of extra, ultra-sensitive, sixth sense, so to speak, to be able to experience something and to feel something which is deeper than what you see on paper. You know, this is the same reason that Jewish mothers, sometimes they know things. They're able to machaven things that you can't see because they feel it. Even though the feeling, according to Kabbalah, is not based on something emotional, it's actually based on a very deep, hidden intellectual faculty, which they have an extra dose of. Now that place, which is called Bina, is actually the makom for Kodesh, meaning that the place in which Chokhmah, the highest male spiritual faculty, the highest level of male consciousness, which is called Chokhmah, which is called wisdom, this light, Rabbi Nachman compares in the first Torah of the Likutey Moharan to the sun. And the sun itself is too intense to be able to experience as it is. So therefore, it needs to establish itself in a space. It needs to establish itself within some levels of boundaries and a limitation and a makom. And in this makom, in this place, now you can experience the light of Chokhmah. That space is called Bina. This is all alluded to, says the Zohar, in a very hidden way in the very beginning of the Torah, that it says, Bereshit bar Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, Hashem created Shemayim va'aretz. What is Bereshit? Bet, Reshit. Reshit, according to the Midrash, is referring to Torah, which we know that Torah is Hashem's Chokhmah, it's Hashem's wisdom. What's the Be? So if you spell out the Bet, it's Beit, it's a home, it's a makom. So what's the word Bereshit? Bereshit is Chokhmah and Bina. That is, that Reshit is only possible to be experienced right now in this world through the home, through the Beit. This is the same deeper reason for why Jewish people who are soul searching, they're often not able to find Hashem except in somebody's home. That often they're not able to connect to Hashem in a more formal place, in a more formal setting. But when they're invited over somebody's home over for Shabbat, if they're invited over somebody's home just to be able to eat and to drink and to speak, all of a sudden they start to have revelations of Chokhmah, of God consciousness. Now, what's the reason? Because wherever you find Bina, you're going to find Chokhmah. That the Zohar says these are like two lovers which never depart. That wherever you find Mrs. Bina, you're going to find Mr. Chokhmah. Wherever you find the makom for Kedusha, you're going to find Kedusha. So this pasuk, which is saying, who is going to ascend to the mountain of Hashem, meaning who's going to be able to elevate to God consciousness? And who is going to be able to ascend to the place, to the makom of his kodesh? So we're saying that this is the concept of mochin, consciousness. Who's going to wake up? Meaning, who's going to be able to merit to da'at? Rav Natan says, who's going to merit to true, genuine knowledge? The knowledge which is not bli amuna and bli da'at, but is infused with tremendous levels of amuna, of faith, of da'at, of consciousness that is rooted in and sourced in godliness. Shu bechinat har Hashem umkom kodsho, hainu, meaning Beit HaMikdash. Because it's explained that just as the Mishkan says the teachings of the Zohar, says the Midrash Rabbah, says the Or Chaim HaKadosh, that the Mishkan is a miniature world, and that the Mishkan was created by Moshe just like Hashem created the universe, with the same exact details and particulars. It was exactly corresponding, except at a miniature level. And we know that Hashem said, build the Mishkan and I'm going to dwell in them. And all the sages say, what do you mean? Build the Mishkan and I'll dwell in the Mishkan. And the reason is because even more miniature than the Mishkan, a micro level of the Mishkan, which was a micro level of the universe, is you. You are a living Mishkan. What part of you is the Mishkan? What part of you, which that eventually turned the Mishkan into the Beit HaMikdash, that we're waiting for the revelation of the final Beit HaMikdash. We're waiting for that final home in which we can experience the light of God consciousness. So based on everything we said now, hopefully you're going to be able to understand that this is not just referring to a physical building, which is going to be spaced in Yerushalayim at the Har HaBayit, but that this Har HaBayit, this mountain for the home, is your own head. It's your own mind. Meaning to say that we're all waiting that our minds should actually be a space of consciousness and not a space of externality. That it should be a space of spirituality and not a space which is solely focused on physicality. That when the Jewish mind, when the national and international consciousness is that of godliness, is that of transcendence, then we have built the Beit HaMikdash at our most fundamental primal level within ourselves. And this is really the reason why we're looking forward to the building of the actual Beit HaMikdash, because that is a manifestation of the one in which we build in our mind. This is why Rabbi Nachman says in the Likutey, we know that Rabbi Nachman was a very, very, very big proponent that his students and the Jewish people in general should wake up and say Tikkun Chatzot every morning. That they should wake up before the dawn and they should mourn over the loss of the Beit HaMikdash. Now, on paper, it's very hard for us to do so, not just because of the time, but because of what's our connection to this building from 2,000 years ago, that I'm able to make my priorities in such a way that I'm going to go to sleep early and get up early so that I can go mourn over a building that was destroyed 2,000 years ago, which I have no whiff of. I have no even semblance of any type of connection to it, even though the sages say that we do. Okay, that's great, but I don't feel it. So Rabbi Nachman says in Likutey, you need to find yourself in your lamenting over the loss of the Beit HaMikdash. Where am I going to find myself? All of the prayers are referring to the destruction of this home, that it's now filled with impurity, it's now filled with darkness, it's now filled with idols, because it's taught by Rabbi Nachman, it's taught by the Arizal, it's taught by the Zohar that your mind is the Beit HaMikdash. And the reason why the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed in Yerushalayim and it's still not rebuilt, that's because your mind is still in a state of destruction. That's because your mind is still in a state of confusion. Your mind is still in a state of excess. And this is the secret for why the Gemara says any Jew who acquires da'at in their life, any Jew who experiences, who manifests daya, that he now knows Hashem, it's as if he built the Beit HaMikdash in his generation. Why? What's the connection? What's the connection between me experiencing a higher level of understanding than I previously did and the building of this thing which we're all waiting for now for 2,000 years, which signals the complete transformation of reality, the complete transformation of a new existence, a new world order, that there'll be one of peace, that there's going to be one of joy, it's going to be one of unity, it's going to be one of love. So all because there's a new building? And the answer is, it's your mind. Think about it. What happens? What is it that causes that a person can have a complete change in his life? It's when his mind changes, when you change your mind. When a person changes his mind, that's how he experiences transformation. When a person goes to therapy, what are they working with the person to do? To change his mind. That he's coming in and he has thought processes and he has core beliefs about things. And those thought processes and core beliefs are leading to his demise or her demise, because they're leading to sadness, they're leading to anxiety, they're leading to self-deprecation, they're leading to destructive behaviors. All of those thoughts are coming from distorted thinking. They're coming from the destruction of that person's own personal Beit HaMikdash. However, once that person's mind is changed, or what we're going to say is augmented, it's transformed, which Rabbi Nachman and Rav Natan is saying now comes from the uplifting of Emunah, the finding of the lost princess, that through my finding of Emunah, by cleaning my hands with waters of Da'at, by learning the Torah of Rabbi Nachman and Fega, by learning the Torah of the true tzaddikim, of the Hasidic masters, of the Mekubalim, and as a result of that, now my Emunah is increased, and now I am able to build my own personal Beit HaMikdash. And my mind is changed now. And now I'm happy. And literally my whole world is transformed, not figuratively. It's not like, okay, now I perceive reality differently, so now I'm happy. Your whole world is taking place in your mind. What you see outside of you is only a projection of what's in your mind, even according to science. There is nothing going on outside of your mind. That's the reason why a person who he has hallucinations, he has schizophrenia, his world is a very dark place. And that's why he's so scared. And that's why he's so troubled. Because he's not just experiencing within himself struggle and strife. That's what he experiences in the whole world. Because the world is a manifestation of one's mind. So too, the power, the koach of Rabbi Nachman, which I feel is more powerful than anything in the world. And I'm not exaggerating. The koach of the Chassidus, of the knowledge, of the wisdom of Rabbi Nachman, is it shakes up your whole world, because everything that he teaches is a complete paradigm shift. You thought that being embarrassed by others is the most horrifying experience. I have to fight against it. I need to defend myself. I need to increase my conflict with the person who does so. Rabbi Nachman says, you don't have to. It's the greatest thing in the world. You say, thank you, Hashem. It's actually elevating you beyond prior difficulties that you had. Okay, that's a huge paradigm shift. Now I'm not responding with anger, with vengeance, with vehemence. I'm smiling in the face of embarrassment. One paradigm shift. Rabbi Nachman comes and he teaches us that in truth, things are not what they look like. And even though it looks on paper that this is the most horrifying struggle, in truth, this is the greatest revelation of the light of Hashem. It's coming from the Keter. It's coming from the crown of spirituality, which is the highest root of the light of the Ein Sof. Now, all of a sudden, my whole relationship to the darkness in my life changes because I realize that the darkness is really the highest light. I have another paradigm shift, and it doesn't end. Every single lesson of Rabbi Nachman is another paradigm shift after another paradigm shift. What is he doing? He's changing your mind. Because the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash was destruction of the Jewish mind. And this is why Rabbi Nachman says, you need to get up and say Tikkun Chatzot. Because all the causes, all the problems which you're suffering from, they're not coming from the events that are taking place in your life. Because those events that are taking place in your life are nothing more than a mere projection of the distortion of the mind. So if you realize that the reason that I'm struggling financially is because of a distortion of the mind, now I have reason to get up in the morning and mourn over the destruction of my mind. If I understand that my shalom bayit issues, my domestic peace issues at home, which are the bane of my existence, are coming from a blemish of the mind, now I have reason to get up and cry over the loss, because I understand that I'm crying over my shalom bayit. That if I have sadness, that if I experience depression, if I experience hopelessness, which anybody who goes through this knows that it is the worst experience of all human experience, that Rabbi Nachman says it's Gehenna mamish, it's hell mamish. So I have what to cry over, because I understand that the real reason I'm depressed is because the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, is because I don't have da'at. I don't know Hashem. But then I have tefillin. But if I have tefillin, now I have life. Because the tefillin are a bayit. They're home. They're like a little miniature Beit HaMikdash in your head. You fixed it. Shu bechinat har Hashem u'makom kodsho. This is the mountain of Hashem, the place of his kodesh, meaning the Beit HaMikdash, shu bechinat da'at, which is the concept of da'at Rabbi Nachman teaches. Now, who gets to experience that? And this is the kicker. And this is the reason why I find that Kiruv is weak. This is the reason why I find that modern Orthodoxy is weak. And this is not to bash anything. This is not to poo-poo anything. This is not to say that people who are involved in these things don't have the best intentions and aren't trying their hardest, and they think that this is the way. But ultimately, even though we think and we're concerned that if we give people a full dose of Judaism, if we give people the whole real shebang, they're going to be intimidated. They're not going to feel like it connects to us in the modern 2021 world. And therefore, I'm scared I'm going to lose them if I don't just tell them really nice things, which inspire them for like 1 minute, so that they'll be able to come back again to the next Shabbaton. So they'll be able to check in for the next chizuk, but their life is in shambles. And they just keep doing that over and over and over again. and they present themselves to the world as if everything is okay, and inside their mom is suffering and toiling and struggling at the highest level. The reason is because to get to the heart of Hashem, it doesn't come with just nice chizuk. It doesn't come from interesting gematrias. It doesn't come only from information. David HaMelech says, Neki chapayim uvar lebav. The person who ascends to the mountain of Hashem, the person who ascends to God consciousness, to da'at, to knowing Hashem, which is the goal according to the Rambam, it's the goal according to the Balatanya, it's the goal according to the Arizal HaKadosh, it's the goal according to the Zohar, it's the goal according to everything, to know Hashem. That's called tefillin. You cannot acquire tefillin, you can't put on tefillin, says the Gemara Menachot, until you wash your hands. Ki ayadei bar leva, because now that I have a pure heart, kuna ki chapayim, that's the concept of the lifting of the hands. B'chinat nisa levavenu el kapayim, like the pasuk says in Eicha, the lifting of our heart to the hands. Meaning to say that what is it that causes the hands to ascend? It's the pure heart. And through this, I'm able to ascend to the house of Hashem. Now here you see one of the inherent seeming, at least externally, machloket between the teachings of, let's say, Rabbi Nachman and the teachings of Chabad Hasidus. Because you see, and it's very clear from Rabbi Nachman's teachings, that the main ikar of his teachings is to create within the Jew a basar lev, a breslev. That you flip the letters of breslev around and it's basar lev. It's a heart of flesh. It's a pure heart. Because Rabbi Nachman teaches that the pure heart is the vessel, it's the keli to experiencing the pure mind. And you cannot get to the pure mind without the pure heart. And this is the reason why, and he's showing it from David HaMelech in Tehillim, who gets to ascend to the mountain of Hashem? Only the person with the pure heart. So this is the reason why his main focus is on the elevation of the heart, because through the elevation of the heart, you experience the God consciousness of the mind. Whereas, let's say in the teachings of Chabad, that the main focus is on the mochin, it's on the elevation of the mind. And through that, you're going to have an elevation of the heart. Rabbi Nachman says it doesn't work that way. And often I speak to people and I've had this experience, let's say when they're with the teachings of Chabad Hasidus, which are amazing, they're incredible, they're a genius on a level which is unparalleled, but they don't get to experience the teachings. It's like a closed book for them. They hear about all of these levels of moach, of chokhmah, bina, and da'at, and they're constantly focused on it. And yet, in their meditations, in their hibonanut, they have told me privately, many of them, that they're struggling with negative thoughts, with anger, with sadness, with jealousy, with ego, despite all of their high level of meditation, of thinking, of focus on Chabad, trying to analyze through the different vicissitudes of the mind. So the reason is, and I've explained this to one of my good friends, because Rabbi Nachman says it's impossible for a person to think clearly until his mind is clear, because it's explicit from Kabbalah, from Chassidut, from the Torah, that the place, the makom in which you experience chokhmah is within the heart. So until the heart is pure, one can't experience their mind as it actually is. This is the example that we often give in the classes, that you have, let's say, a cup. This cup is dark. So everything that I fill in this cup, which we're going to call your mind, you fill your mind into this cup, which we're going to say is your heart. So when you experience the thoughts of your mind, so it's taught by the Arizal, Rabbi Nachman teaches, it's impossible to experience those thoughts directly from the mind. You have to experience it through your heart, because your heart is the vessel for that which is in the mind. That Bina is the makom for the experience of kedusha, the level of godliness. So too, if this is black, so then my thoughts are going to appear black. Even if the thoughts are pure, even if I'm trying to meditate on pure things, still, because my heart is black, it's dark, it's unrectified, it's still in a place of brokenness, it's shattered. So as a result of that, all my thoughts are shattered. So why does Rabbi Nachman focus on simcha? Why does Rabbi Nachman put such an emphasis on we have to be happy all the time? It's a mitzvah gedola, because Rabbi Nachman says it's impossible for a Jew to think clearly unless he's happy, because simcha is a revelation of a pure heart. Because the only ability for a Jew to truly be happy, which Rabbi Nachman says is the hardest thing to do, right? The reason why he says it's a mitzvah gedola is because it's so hard. And we know that the Arizal teaches that mitzvahs are only in the place of tikkun, meaning we only need a mitzvah where we're lacking in a certain place. So if it's a mitzvah gedola, it's because this is a very hard thing to do. Why is such a hard thing to do, to be happy? Because happiness is actually coming from a pure heart. And that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of growth. That takes a lot of getting up and falling. That takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of searching for Hashem. It takes a lot of hibodedut. It takes a lot of trial and error and a lot of merit. And only after all of this does a person have a pure heart. That's why you often see that who is the person who really looks happy? It's often a person who has been involved in this path of Breslov for many, many years. Because the path of the pure heart is one in which takes time. But at least at the end of the tunnel, you know that you're going to attain simcha. And if you attain simcha, that means you have a pure heart. That means you get to ascend to the mountain of Hashem. You now have da'at, you have chayim, you have life, you have tefillin. And it's through this that you elevate to the mountain of Hashem. It's called the da'at, that you merit the da'at. And this is the concept of that I lifted my hands up to Shemayim. The concept of machlokit l'shem Shemayim. That Rabbi Nachman teaches that the highest version of da'at, the highest version of consciousness, is actually what's called machlokit l'shem Shemayim. When I am toiling and fighting to find a deeper truth than the one in which I have right now, so that actual experience is the highest level of truth. Because Rabbi Nachman says, in fact, that machlokit l'shem Shemayim is a higher level of shalom, it's a higher level of peace than peace itself. This is something which it needs its own lesson for it to be able to fully understand this. But just to go and to show how deep and how powerful is the concept of fighting and searching and toiling for the truth. Chesed, Gevur, Tiferet. This is the concept of Chesed, Gevur, and Tiferet she'ole v'naseh mimenu chokhmah bina da'at. So this is getting into more deep Kabbalah, which is to say, very simply, when is something rectified? When is something mended? When is something whole? This takes place only when you bring it back to its source. What is the source of chesed, which we call the right hand in Kabbalah? That is what's right above it in the Sfirot. That's chokhmah. So that is, when is chesed rectified? When is love rectified? Love is rectified when it has hikashrut, when it's attached to chokhmah, wisdom. Now I'm able to give out love in a way which is beneficial for those around me and for myself. Now it's rectified. What about Gevura? That is the left hand. That's the concept of discipline or limitation or restriction. When is that beneficial? Only when it is in its source, that's Bina, when it's infused with understanding. So now that I have understanding, I'm able to use limitation in a way which only benefits myself and others. That I'm limiting myself for the sake of getting closer to good, that I'm putting boundaries around myself in order to make sure that I'm connected to spirituality and that I'm not connected only to physicality or only to gashmiut, to the secular world. But instead, the ikar for me is spirituality, and I use the physical world as a means, as a vehicle for doing that. So now Gevura, limitation, is lifted up to its source in Bina. And we have what's called the middle hand, which obviously we know we don't have a physical middle hand, but there is spiritually a middle hand. And this middle hand, Tiferet, when is it rectified? When it's in its source in Da'at. That is, when is truth beneficial to me? When my truth is rooted in God consciousness. When my truth that I'm examining, that I'm meditating on, that I'm living with, is not one which is bli da'at, bli emuna, but when it's rooted in the highest levels of consciousness, when it's infused with the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, of Rabbi Nachman, of the Hasidic masters, the Mekubalim, now my truth is elevated to the highest place. And when I have uplifted these three hands to Chokhmah Bina Da'at, that only comes from the washing. Through the purifying of my hands, now they're lifted up to their source, and now the source itself is whole. Because it needs to have its children in order to be able for the parents to be happy. So too, the children of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at are Chesed, Gevur, and Tiferet. And until they come home, the parents are not happy. Anybody have any questions from this lesson so far? Bezrat Hashem, we're going to continue this tomorrow. We have 5 minutes. Please ask whatever questions you have. The more questions that you have, the better. Only a person who asks questions grows.
Rabbi.
Yes.
So I have a question. So it's still hard for me to understand. I always have an example of, they give me a sample of a dad and a son, like if you have a son, you want the best for your son. You want your son to learn. You want the son to grow. You want the son to have the best of the best, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You don't want your son to suffer.
Sure.
But if your son decides to go the wrong way or decides to disobey you, with your pain in your heart, with the, with your hand in your heart, or the pain that it brings you have to let your son go through hardness, right? You have to let your son go through the pain so he could learn on his own, because he doesn't want to obey what you commanded to do, correct?
Okay.
Now, if I tell my son, please do not jump on the table, because if you keep jumping on the table, you might fall and break your head open, right? Now, you have the ability to stop your son to jump on the table. You could bring him down and give him, I would say, punish him, right? But you decide to let your son jump on the table, and the table breaks, and he breaks his head open, and you take him to the hospital. You have the ability to stop it, but you didn't, because you want your son to understand that when you're not around, he's gonna jump on the table. You understand? But now he's not, because now he learned his lesson, and now he's not gonna do it. So this is and a lot of samples like this is my sample of Hashem not wanting you to go through hardish. And let me finish. I know you're gonna answer, but Hashem doesn't want us to go to pain. Let's say, God forbid, somebody gets raped, a boy gets raped, or a woman gets raped, and Hashem doesn't want this for the kid to get raped. Now he allows, and he might use that for the good of the guy, of the girl, because if they learn, if they get strong, they're gonna help people that went through it, right? So they could learn, and they're gonna learn, and they're gonna go through it. But there's people that don't have the art, and they will never get the that, and they die and they kill themselves because they can't bear with the pain. You understand? But that's not Hashem's fault. Hashem that's not his fault that the person didn't get the da'at, or they didn't look for the answer, or they didn't have the ability to learn, or you understand what I'm saying? Like, Hashem could use anything bad that happens to you, because we have free will, and he could use it to your advantage, so you could learn, because you're gonna have people have 2 points of view. They have a good point of view, and then the other point of view that they don't have that. So for me to have is hard to understand. I know you're saying there is a truth and there is a truth to truth, and Hashem, Hashem might be behind the bad things that happen to you. Yeah, but if you put it this way, then how is rape, and how is the other bad things that people can even handle? And the Torah says that Hashem will give you a test that you could handle. But there is some people, how can you explain, there are some people that they have this big test and they kill themselves because they can't bear it, they can't handle it. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so Daniel, it's a good question. There's nothing harder than a person going through something, not being able to understand it, this causing so much inner pain. And then, like you said, sometimes, unfortunately, they end up taking their own lives. Hashem should prevent any of this from happening anymore. And I know we're constantly dealing with this, but this is a matter in which Rabbi Nachman says we can't understand currently. How could it be that we have complete free will to choose to do whatever we want, whenever we want, and at the same time Hashem is saying, and he's creating and manifesting reality constantly, that he's creating something from nothing in every moment, in every place, in every space, in every time, in every situation, in every circumstance. So how could it be both? And Rabbi Nachman says we can't understand now. Because right now, in our minds, in our experiences, our limited understanding of reality, these two things don't fit together. It can't be that we have free will and yet Hashem decides. Either we decide or Hashem does. They can't go together. However, the truth is they only can't go together because right now we're limited in what we can understand. Just like a child, when he's a little kid, he's not able to understand abstract things. So if you ask him an abstract question, he's not going to have the answer to you. The only thing he has answers for are answers or questions which are solid, which are tangible, which he can chab. And as he gets older and he matures, he's able to understand many facets to the thing, that it's not just black or white. It's not one or the other, but somehow it can hold multiple levels of truth. So to us, no matter how much we know, no matter how smart we are, no matter how intelligent we may be, no matter how much information, no matter how much wisdom we may have worked to achieve, to accrue, still, Rabbi Nachman says, no matter what, it is impossible for a person while he's living in this current stage of reality that's called Olam Hazeh, that's called exile, that's called the 6,000 years of creation, to be able to understand how it could be that we have complete free will and yet Hashem causes everything that takes place. We can't understand it.
Again, Rabbi, yes, I understand what you're saying. We don't understand, but we have the scriptures, we have the Torah, we have the Tanakh.
Again, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't matter. It's true. But at the same time, the Torah is only speaking to you at a level that you currently understand. However, we know that when the Mashiach comes, he's going to reveal a greater revelation of the Torah. He's not changing the Torah, chas v'shalom. The Torah is never going to change. It's infinite. So what is the Mashiach going to do that's different than whatever was before? So the answer is he's going to bring new revelations of this Torah that wasn't previous. What are those revelations? One of those revelations is how it could be that we have complete free will, and yet everything is hashgacha pratit. Everything is whatever Hashem decides. So it's not a contradiction to the fact that it's in the Torah. The fact that it's in the Torah, good, great, thank God. But just because it's in the Torah doesn't mean that we are capable, we have the capacity to understand the Torah at every level right now. Because the first tablets were destroyed when Moshe came down from the mountain. The second tablets were not. Now, those first tablets, it's not that that's a different Torah than the one we have now, because the Torah is the Torah, but it's a higher revelation of the Torah that we have now. And that revelation of the Torah, we do not understand right now because we're not capable of it. And you don't have to be. You don't have to be able to bring these two things together right now. You only have to be aware that there's such a thing. Now, for a person to be able to be humble enough to say that it's okay that I don't understand how these things go together, to be able to listen to the Rebbe and to be able to say, I'm going to leave this alone and move forward and just try and get closer to Hashem, try to get closer to truth, trying to get closer to be a better person, to be a better member of the community, X, Y, and Z, to elevate myself spiritually and physically. Good, just keep going. And in the end, Rabbi Nachman says all the questions are going to clear up. We don't have to know the answer right now. Okay. There's another question here on the bottom. You said something that hashgacha pratit and being in exile. Can you please explain that further? How can you balance chesed and gevurah? I have a difficult time with gevurah. Okay. So first question is the concept of hashgacha pratit. What does it mean? Hashgacha means providence. For instance, you have in a restaurant, you have hashgacha. In order for a restaurant to be kosher, it needs to have hashgacha. It needs to have supervision. When there is really good hashgacha, so then there's really good kashrut. When there is really high levels of supervision, then we can trust that it's kosher. That means that there's always somebody in the premises making sure, watching everything that happens to make sure it goes according to the way that it should be. So too, that concept of hashgacha in a restaurant is what Hashem does in the whole world. He's constantly supervising and orchestrating everything that takes place in the world so that it should go according to the way that is good, according to the way that he wants to. So that's hashgacha. Pratit means particular or individual, that is to you, or to events that take place. That Hashem's hashgacha, that is opposed to, let's say, what people thought prior to the revelation of Avraham Avinu, of Yitzchak Avinu, of Yaakov Avinu, and specifically Moshe Rabbeinu, that prior to these tzaddikim, who they achieved a higher level of consciousness, so people only believed, one second. People only believed that providence was global, meaning that God or the gods, they were only busy with big things. But they didn't necessarily care about an individual life. They didn't necessarily care about particular details of what took place in the world. This was not their concern. One of the chidushim of the Torah is that Hashem cares about every single detail of reality, cares about every person in reality, cares about every creation in reality. And everything is a creation. Even the vegetable level of reality, even the inanimate level of reality. All of these are creations. Everything in existence, even time and space is a creation. So Hashem cares about it. And not only does he care about it, but he has hashgacha. He's supervising all of it, all the time. So this is the concept of hashgacha, that Hashem is supervising and orchestrating reality at every moment, not just on a grand macro level, but on a particular individual micro level, on the level of you in your personal life, your own feelings, your own emotions, your own thoughts, as well as the events that take place in your life and the circumstances that unfold. Hashem is supervising, is orchestrating all of them. That's called hashgacha pratit. The whole ikar of Rabbi Nachman's teachings is to mamish, pound this into your heart, that this is all that there really is, that there's only hashgacha pratit, and that whatever appears to be teva, what appears to be nature, what appears to be happenstance, that's only really a lower level of revelation of hashgacha pratit. That the reason it appears to be teva, it appears to be nature, it appears to be happenstance, is only because this is a very, very, very concealed level of hashgacha pratit. But still, it's Hashem. It's just enclosed many times over to the extent that you don't see the hashgacha pratit. But it's still the same exact particular supervision orchestration as when you see the ocean split, as when you see open miracles in your life, as when you see tremendous revelations of mind-bending, nature-transforming reality. That's the same thing as when I throw a ball off a building and it falls to the floor in the form of gravity. Gravity is Hashem causing that the ball should fall to the bottom every time. And it looks like it's a fixed law of nature, but the fixed law of nature is only an illusion. It's just Hashem causing it to take place every time over and over and over again. When a person knows that, so then he has da'at. He knows Hashem. So this is the concept of it being an exile, meaning because the whole exile of a person is the exile of his mind. It's the exile of his consciousness. It's the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash in his own personal life, in his own emotional, psychological reality. So your ability to mend and to fix and to elevate that is through the internalization in the mind and the heart and the soul of da'at, to know that everything is being orchestrated and supervised by Hashem. Once I know that, then all of a sudden there is a complete change of inner dialogue even within myself about the events that take place in my life. Oh, my wife is giving me a hard time, not just because my wife is difficult, but because Hashem wants to convey something to me, because nothing takes place unless Hashem wants it to. So why do I have lack of peace in my relationship at home with my wife? Because Hashem wants there to be. Why does he want there to be? Obviously, there's an ability for me to learn something and to grow closer, to elevate higher because of this discord than there would be if it didn't take place. Okay, but prior to me knowing that it's from Hashem, so now I'm a slave to my circumstances. Now I am in servitude to people, places, and things, and I have no ability to be free. But if I understand that Hashem is the cause of what's taking place in my life, and what's happening down here is only a manifestation of what Hashem wants to happen, so now I can go back and I can go talk to Hashem, that I can go speak to him in the field, and I could say, Hashem, what do you want me to learn? What am I missing? Why is it that my wife keeps telling me that I'm selfish? Am I selfish? Is there a part of me that, despite my reaction to her, that there's something wrong with her, that she's not educated, that she's not thinking properly, that she's this? But let me look deeper. Maybe I am. Maybe there is something inside of me. Now, why would Hashem have it that my wife would tell me that? Because whatever that quality is that my wife is telling me, that is getting in the way of me being close to Hashem. Because a selfish person can't know Hashem. Because you can't have a space for something which is infinite if you're dealing always with something that's finite, that is one's own ego. So why is it that I need to get married? Because my wife is going to show me what's wrong. Now, on paper, what happens to many people? They end up getting divorced, unfortunately. And we shouldn't know this. But you see that the majority of people in the world, in the modern world, get divorced, those that get married. That if you get married, there's just as good a chance, if not a better chance, that you won't be soon as when you started, except the amount of pain and suffering and financial discord that's going to take place as a result. And then if you have children, the ramifications that take place for the rest of your life and your children's life, their children's life, right? All because I got married and I got divorced. Now, what's the main reason why a person gets married and then gets divorced? Is because they think that they made the wrong choice. They feel that their spouse is not the right person for them. And what's the reason they feel like that? Because their spouse is speaking to vulnerabilities about them constantly, and they can't take it. Why do they keep telling me that I'm too sensitive? Why do they keep telling me that I'm selfish? Why do they keep saying that I'm not thinking about them enough? Why do they keep speaking about the fact that I'm not present as a father, as a mother? Why are they saying X, Y, and Z? So if they keep bothering me about it, so what am I going to do? I got married because I want to be happy. This is how the secular world thinks. So now I'm not happy. So it doesn't make sense to be married anymore. So I'm going to get divorced. But if I understand that my spouse is a reflection of what Hashem wants me to know, so now instead of receiving it in a way in which this is not productive, this is counterproductive to me living a good life, But I see it now as the key to productivity, because I'm seeing now through Hashem what Hashem wants, or at least some semblance of what he wants. And now I can go speak to Hashem about it. And I can go look for that thing in myself and work on it. And now I get closer to Hashem and I elevate. So this is the difference between living a life of Gan Eden or Gehenna. Like Rav Shalom Arush says, that Gan Eden and Gehenna, that heaven and hell, they're right next to each other. The only thing that's separating them is Amunah. Do I believe that what's happening in my life is taking place from Hashem, or do I not? If I think it's from Hashem, now I'm in Gan Eden. If I think it's just happening from people, places, and things, now I'm in Gehenna. And the only difference is Da'at. Do I know it's from Hashem or I don't? So this is that concept, okay? The fact that we don't know it's from Hashem, and even if we do it in our mind, but we don't have it in our heart, because Da'at is only complete when it reaches the heart, so too, Da'at is in exile. Hashgacha Pratit is in exile. The Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. The other question here is about Chesed and Gevurah. Someone says they have a difficult time with Gevurah. So you and me are in the same boat, and many people in our generation. What is Gevurah? Gevurah is the concept of self-discipline, self-limitation, or limitation with others. What's the reason? Part of the reason why we have a very difficult time asserting boundaries and limitations with others is because we have very low self-esteem. So because we have low self-esteem, we don't want to hurt anybody else. But the real reason we don't want to hurt anybody else or create any kind of discord is because I don't want that person to leave me. I don't want that person not to like me. Because right now, my whole concept of self is bound up with them. But if I build in Da'at, if I start to know that really I have a godly soul, and I'm speaking to Hashem for the hour a day that Rabbi Nachman says to, and I'm getting more in touch with my inner self. So now that I'm building my inner self, now my inner self is not dependent on what other people think about me. And now I can make boundaries that are positive for me. I could stop hanging out with people that are not good for me. I can stop getting into conversations which I know confuse me and distract me from my goals. I can go to sleep at a certain time and wake up at a certain time. I can do other things because I believe in myself. Because my ability to form boundaries that are strong, that I have conviction of, that all comes with belief in Hashem and belief in oneself. So your ability to apply Gevurah is really dependent on your level of Amunah. To the degree in which you have Amunah in Hashem, in His Torah, in the true tzaddikim, and specifically in your tzaddik, in your Rebbe, and within yourself, to that degree, you're going to be able to make boundaries and limitations which are based on the advice and the wisdom of those different levels. Okay, everybody have an amazing, amazing day. Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow we're going to continue, and I hope to finish this lesson. And then tomorrow night, we're going to continue Likutey Moharan, Torah Vav, which is a very, very deep, very powerful, very important Torah, which we are diving into. It's a very intense one. So you're going to have your big boy pants on or big girl pants on. And Bezrat Hashem, we're going to be able to draw closer to Hashem and to experience another paradigm shift, to have another changing of the mind, and that this brings us closer and closer and closer to Hashem Yiparach, to His Torah, to the true tzaddikim, and ultimately to the true revelations of ourselves. And then we should experience the Mashiach and the Geula b'Merav Yameinu and our own personal Beit HaMikdash rebuilt soon in our days. Everybody have an amazing, amazing, happy day.